comes off. And when we come to the item on attendance by reserve members, I will ask all members present and officers to introduce themselves. Can I refer members and officers to the published protocols for holding virtual meetings, noting the following. Members of the panel to ensure they have their videos on at all times and microphones on mute unless speaking. In the case of a technical problem, the meeting may adjourn until the issue is resolved. If the technical problem persists and the meeting is in quorum, the meeting will be abandoned and rearranged for a later date. This meeting is being audio and video recorded and will be available on the website, Council's website, in due course. Item 1 is reserved by attendance by reserve members. I haven't been notified of any, so if I kick off, I'm Councillor Keith Ferry and I'm the chair of the panel. Gasanfa.
Councillor Gasanfa Ali. Councillor of the Green Hill Ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Varsha.
Hello, Councillor Varsha Palmer, Marlborough Ward and PH4 Environment.
And Dave.
Hello everybody, Labour member Councillor David Perry, and I too represent the Marlborough Ward.
Marilyn.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Marilyn Ashton. I'm Vice Chairman of this panel and I'm the Conservative spokesman on this panel.
Stephen.
Good evening, Councillor Stephen Greek, Conservative Councillor for Harrow Weald and Vice Chair of Overview and Scrutiny.
And Paul.
Councillor Paul Osborne, Pinner Ward Councillor and Leader of the Conservative Group.
Fine, that's a full house. Beverly, can you get the officers to introduce themselves?
I will do that. I'll start with myself. I'm Beverly Kushar. I'm the Chief Planning Officer, and I think supporting me tonight is Sushila, who will introduce herself now.
Fine. Okay. Item 2, declarations of interest. They have already been published and are available on the website. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of July 2020. Councillor Ashton has proposed an amendment to the minutes, which is available on the website. With those amended minutes, are you happy to approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of July?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Item 4, public questions. None have been received. Item 5, are there any petitions to be presented by members of the panel or members of the public? I don't believe there are. Item 6, deputations. No requests for deputations have been received. So if we could move on to item 7, which is the presentation on Harrowview East, and I'd like to invite the developer to make a presentation. I believe that's Martin Scholar, the applicant, who is representing Barrett's, yep, and Dominique Oliver and Lee Bullimore, who represent the architects.
Yep. Yeah, that's correct, Councillor. We've got the rest of our consultant team here as well, so if there's any questions, we can go to them. So, Dominic, could you put the presentation up, please, or Lee?
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, so this is a presentation on the next phase of our development, which we now call Eastman Village, which is the former Kodak factory, which I know many of you know, or probably all of you know very well historically. I know Councillor Ferry does very well. So next slide, please. We're going to talk about the context. We're going to talk about the two development plots. We're talking about C1 and B1, transportation, the consultation and programme, and finally we'll end with the benefits of the proposal. Next slide. Again. Yeah, I mean, this is, I think you all know the site very well. So the former Kodak factory, which was there for 125 years, been closed now since I think 2014, 2015. We took control of the site in 2016, bought the site from Land Securities. There's on our side of the road, Harrowview East, as it was historically known, there's two developers, so as ourselves in a partnership with Hyde, and at the southern end of the site is L&Q, who also own a part of the site. And obviously you can see the relationship with the town centres, Headstone Manor and the stations. Next slide please, Lee. And this slide is really just to show the extent of the site and what's happened or is happening. So at the south is L&Q, which obviously that's a separate part of the site. We don't own that. They haven't started construction yet, and we understand that hopefully that's imminent. The north of the site is Big Yellow, which has recently been to the planning committee, I think, has permission for one of their self-storage units and space to warehouse type units. And then the rest of the site is controlled by ourselves and Hyde. And on the left-hand side is a plot known as D7, which has actually started construction. It's where you see all the construction vehicles at the moment, and people have already begun to move into those flats. So we've got 73 occupants already, and we're very careful, as I've said at previous meetings, to ensure that the people moving into those flats are from the local area, and we have evidence to support that the vast majority of people have actually moved in from Harrow and its environs. And then recently D1 to D6, which is in the centre of your screen, that planning permission, we're very close to signing the Section 106 agreement. That went to planning committee in January, and as I say, the Section 106 is looming. And tonight we're going to talk about the plot at the top, which is known as C1, and the plot at the bottom, which is known as B1. So next slide, please, Lee. And then this is just as a reminder of what's been previously approved by the planning committee in 2017. So 290 homes at the top of the site, which we inherited from an outline permission from Land Securities. So we obtained reserve matters approval for that development. So we had 290 homes, leisure use and community use. And then the next slide, please. And then at the bottom of the site, on the Headstone Drive, 60 homes of 5 to 8 stories. Again, that was in accordance with the reserve matters approval. So what the architectural team at PT are going to do tonight in the next 10 to 15 minutes is just take you through those changes. So over to you, Lee and Dommy.
Thanks, Martin. We've just put in a few slides that just describe some of those other plots that Martin mentioned. Actually, this is plots D7 and D8. You may have seen it in passing. As Martin said, they're currently on site, and the first block C is also occupied. Next. Plots D1 to D6, as Martin mentioned, gain planning approval, and this just shows you some of the imagery from that. 1,226 mixed tenure homes within that, including 60 homes for extra care, as well as cafe and flexible uses, and extensive new public realm actually and play space. And these buildings range from 3 to 18 stories at the pinnacle of the park. Next. So plot C1, over the next few slides, I'm just going to take you through our key design moves and where we currently are with the proposals for C1. So this is the arrangement of the reserved matters approval on the site and the current heights that are within that. Our initial move has been to align those block heights with the current emerging context while still enabling a very sensitive transition to the existing context. We've introduced gaps between the blocks along the avenue to provide variety to the streetscape as you move around the site. We have reviewed the positioning of some of the buildings, so we've made the lane wider to make sure really that the new public realm is a pleasant and bright space to dwell in. And we further articulated the mass of the buildings to support placemaking and define character areas, as well as providing a really positive environment with good daylighting. And finally, we've adjusted the height of the prominent building at the end of the park, at the end of the Green Link, so that it has a really good urban relationship with the other two larger buildings in this location. And this slide just shows the layout of the site. It's arranged as 2 blocks, with the avenue running around the buildings to the north and the east, and this provides vehicular access to the site. You've got the park and the Green Link to the south, offering amenity and play opportunities, and a new place that we've called the Lane, which connects the two in the middle of the site, and which in effect is a green residential street. The ground floor accommodation is predominantly new homes. You can see here in blue, lots of individual front doors to the street to really activate that, as well as community space in orange onto the Green Link, onto the park, and a small supermarket you can see there in green onto Harrow View. And all of this is wrapped around 2 car parks that are hidden below the first floor gardens. And on the upper floors, the homes are arranged around cores which have direct routes from the communal gardens, and all the homes are provided with private amenity space. This slide just shows the proposed heights for the scheme, which have been established really to respond to the approved emerging master plan, to maintain a good transition to the existing context, and to ensure that the spaces between the buildings will be bright and sunny and can offer high quality amenity and play space. East have been developing the public realm and landscape to make sure that it successfully knits into the existing and emerging context. There are a series of distinct places that will have their own characters and which offer green and playful public realm for both new and existing communities. This slide just provides an impression of the avenue as you're arriving into the site from Harrow View. You can see from this that the buildings offer visual variety to the streetscape. They provide views through to the site and through to the communal gardens. And down the lane, the scale and the character changes to provide a green, pedestrian and friendly, cycle-friendly residential street with lots of play on the way. And then this shows the taller building at the top of the park as you're approaching from the south, and in the context of the buildings in D4 and D5 on the right hand side and D7 on the left. And we have a brief animation, I think, at this point of this plot which we can share. So if we could just go to that. So this is approaching up the avenue with a big yellow storage on the left hand side and plot C on the right hand side. Hopefully it's not too jittery through Teams, but we're just turning into the lane here. You can see that that's a really lush green space. The idea is to keep vehicles off here as much as possible. It'll just be for servicing and access, so that actually the majority of the space is left for pedestrians and cycles, for lots of play space. You can see that the homes down here have individual front doors onto that, so there's lots of activity and overlooking. And obviously from here you get a fantastic view of the park at the end, and you're just catching the scale of that taller building onto the end of the park. There's obviously lots of space around that as you come to the end here. So that's just merging into the end of the park. The white that you see in front of you is the D7 plots. And then this is again just looking round to the community space at the ground floor, has great access onto the Green Link there, very visible as you're arriving in from Harrow View as well. Thanks, Lee. If we could go back. Great, next slide. So just a very quick summary of the changes to plot C1. There are additional 110 homes of mixed tenure within that. We're retaining all of the community space here. We've relocated the retail accommodation, so that's moved on to Harrow View and is very accessible for not only the residents here, but for the wider community. There's been an adjustment to the building heights from 4 to 10 stories up to 5 to 14 stories. And there's been a wholesale review of the public realm and the landscape design as well. So plot B1. It's just taking some time to move on. There you go. So we've reviewed the heights of the buildings here, again to respond to recent approvals, particularly in this case to plots A3, but also to provide additional affordable homes. In this case, it's a single story addition from 5 and 8 stories to 6 and 9 stories. The blue line shows the previous iteration. And the next slide just shows the images of what this would look like in that context. East have also reviewed the public realm and landscape here, so to improve the relationship of the plot with the green link and the park, and also the future school, which just sits to the north of this site, and also to increase the amount of play space above the previous approval with a general greening of the overall plot. And the summary of changes to B1 is, as you can see here, so 14 additional homes, a story added onto each building, additional play space, as I say, and again, a review of the public realm and landscape design. With regards to transportation, our consultant steer group have set out the following. I'll just run through that. So consistent with the approved D1 to D6 parking strategy, a ratio of 0.3 spaces per dwelling is targeted here across a mixture of on-street and below podium car parking, and this includes 3% accessible car parking. A large proportion of residents are expected to use sustainable modes of travel, not expected to own a car. There will be car club provision within the site. Electric vehicle charging infrastructure will be provided in accordance with the draft London plan, so 20% active provision from the outset, with all remaining spaces benefiting from passive provision. The additional impact of the transport network is actually expected to be negligible when compared to the consented scheme. And the development really aims to put people first, so to support the council's air quality and active travel targets, and has been designed to improve pedestrian and cycle connections to the surrounding area. So cycle parking will be provided in accordance with the draft London plan. We've got approximately 860 spaces for residents and staff, and 37 spaces for visitors across the public realm. And the design also accommodates emerging travel trends, so particularly with regards to taxi drop-off, pick-up and home deliveries and so on. There has been ongoing consultation with Harrow Council through this period and wider key stakeholders, including the GLA. And we've recently launched our public consultation website, have met with near neighbours and key stakeholders. And I'll just pass back to Martin to conclude.
Yeah, thanks, Tommy. So just to conclude, as you say, so we feel this is optimising the development potential of the sites in an accessible location. We think this iteration of the master plan improves the placemaking and the legibility now that we can see what's happening across the entire site. 124 new homes, of which 40% will be affordable, and affordable providing a mix of London affordable rent and shared ownership. And as previous phases, a commitment to sales first, Harrow first sales for local people. A new supermarket, which we think is really, really good because, you know, it's sort of that local shopping that people often need. High quality design and public realm, retaining obviously the employment and the retail uses, which I've mentioned. £6 million community infrastructure levy, new jobs within the construction phase. We estimate already around 2,000 people have been employed or are employed at the site. We endeavour to use local labour and supplies. And we think as well that the important part about helping Wilston Town Centre by having more people into the area will hopefully aid the local shops and facilities and services of the town centre. Thank you, that's it. So we invite questions now, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Are there any questions or comments from members of the panel? Stephen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, thank you for the presentation. I'm going to be quite blunt in my reaction. I just despair. Why is it every time you or the other developers on this site come here, the schemes get taller and taller, we get more and more homes, they get denser and denser. You know, what is it about this site that just keeps getting more and more and more? And you know, it's just getting beyond a joke now. You're wrecking what should be a great housing scheme with great potential with these monstrosities, and you're just going to be warehousing people. I don't understand the point of this green lane you mentioned. I don't see the point of it if it's going to be dominated by a 14-story building. The animation you showed, all I could see was that it was dominated by mass and scaling. Where will any natural light and air be coming from? You know, it's just going to be closed in. And there's probably not much point to be mentioning car parking. Obviously, it's derisory. But you know, and of course, it's going to have an impact on local transport. You know, I mean, if I had a question, it would just be why do you bother coming to us with this rubbish, to be quite honest? And I'm sorry to be so blunt. Well, actually, I'm not sorry to be so blunt because you never listen anyway. And I'm just fed up with it. Where's it going to end? You know, I wouldn't be surprised if next time you come here it'll be double or triple. What, you know, why not? You know, I mean, you know, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's the sort of thing that in 20-30 years time we'll be wanting to knock down. And I'm, you know, I'm just quite sick and tired of it, to be quite honest with you.
Did you want to come back, Martin?
Yeah, I mean, I think being frank, I think that's pretty unfair, really. I think what we're building, and as you can see from the first phase, is high quality homes that meet all relevant standards in terms of amenity space, play space, size of accommodation, quality of build. I think the residents who have moved in are very happy with their new homes. They've all come predominantly from the local area. Harrow has an enormous housing target that this development helps meet. It's in a landscaped public area. The grounds are lovely. It's close to a train station. Yeah, I think it's pretty unfair, really. I genuinely, you know, we're building the new homes that the borough and London need. So I'm struggling with the aggression, really.
Can I just comment on the sort of more technical side? We're working really closely with a wide consultant team of professionals and have worked really closely to make sure that the kind of ground environment is going to be a high quality space. So working in terms of microclimate and daylight and sunlight. So the mass of the buildings is very much to be able to support that and respond to that. And there's been a lot of moves in terms of making sure it's the right place to put any height within the development.
I think as well, it is worth repeating. It's 40% affordable housing. For me, I know you'll disagree. This is a modest increase in scale. It's 1 story on the block at the south. It's up to 4 stories at the northern side. Personally, I think this is pretty modest. Yeah, and you know, I just think if we can't build on sites like this, brownfield sites that have all the supporting uses. Where can we build? There's a housing crisis.
Okay, can we move on to Kasampa's question or comments?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. The first one is about the superstore on C1. How big the superstore is going to be? It'll be able to accommodate like a small store, Morrison or Tesco or Sainsbury. And my second question or comments are the parking, because it'll be very difficult to discourage the owners to not to own a car. And so are you going to put kind of a covenant when on the deed when somebody is going to buy it? I mean, the parking is the main problem, because if Harrowview is very narrow street, I mean, if you go there 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock coming towards Harrow, it's chock-a-block. I mean, I use that road quite often, and if the people are not going to park the cars inside, but they're going to use the streets, so this is going to make it very congested. So how are you going to discourage the owners not to have a car? How are you going to deal with it? Thank you. Thank you, Martin.
So the first question, yeah, it will be a smaller Tesco or Sainsbury, something like that. There will be a smaller store, so a convenience store. It's not going to be a big out-of-town supermarket. I don't know the exact size, but it'll be the sort you see on a local high street where you pop in for local provisions. With regards to car parking, the idea is to have less car parking, because we want to discourage people having cars. Notwithstanding that, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil is our transport consultant. I think Section 106 prevents residents from applying for a permit for the local residents' parking scheme, so they can't put their cars on the surrounding roads. And the whole tenet of the development is to really, obviously we know there's more people today, but we want to restrict car use so that people don't actually go onto the local network. So the idea is, and it's borne out in practice, is to have sustainable travel provisions, and that would include a car club as well, which I understand is also proving successful. Phil, do you want to add something to that?
Well, I think that the early indications from the occupiers is that they've accepted the sort of parking constraints, because it's the sort of place that works really well for living without a car. So I think that's quite encouraging from the early sort of feedback I've sought from Martin's sales people. Yes, you're right about the CPZ controls, etc. That people here couldn't apply for a CPZ so that a ticket, so that basically and they will be aware of that as and when they buy a property, and that covenant carries on for any future occupiers as well. So yes, we understand any development has some degree of traffic impact, but this is a development which I think can come forward in is sustainable a way as we can make housing delivered. It's a really good location to live without a car. The services are there. It's worth just on very quickly on that retail unit. It's obviously below the threshold, and that's quite relevant in that the size means it can open extended hours. It can be open on a Sunday for longer trading hours than the large superstores. So it adds to that ability to live here and do your shopping on a day-to-day basis without having to get in a car to go somewhere else. So I think that's quite useful. That's about it. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Marilyn.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. It was easy to understand. I mean, I kind of understand why Councillor Greek is exercised about this. And I don't, with respect, think it's helpful to accuse a councillor of being of aggression, when in actual fact, I think the right word might be exasperation, which is entirely a different emotion. And I suppose what I would say about this is that, and obviously notwithstanding, this will come to the planning committee eventually, and for those members who are on the planning committee, obviously we have to make up our minds at that time. But it is the buildings are quite a lot higher actually, and they were frankly quite tall buildings to start with. So what happens, unfortunately, and I've heard this all before, is that we get these presentations and the justification for making, if you don't like particularly tall buildings, for making matters worse, as it were, it's not your bag, as it were, is that, well, they're tall, so we've got to kind of make it proportionate, or it has to reflect the general character of the area, or we've informed, it's been informed by buildings, and therefore we have to get higher and higher. I mean, if we're not careful, we're going to end up with some massive structures here. And if we haven't learned anything about urban design, the one thing I think we need to understand is that people do need to feel as if they're at home, and I think Councillor Greek used an excellent word, that people don't want to feel that they're being warehoused. And if buildings become too vast and too tall and too impersonal, then in the end they don't do very well, and the estate doesn't actually live up to its expectations. The danger is that we're actually not building a sustainable community. We're actually just building, and I totally accept that we need some more homes for people, but in some respects, I find these extremely large buildings very homely. So I think that, to be fair, I think that this panel is for exactly this. It's for the developers to come along and show off their wares, and for councillors who have been elected by people to represent them to have a say, and that you can take away from this in a polite manner that there might be some councillors listening to your presentation and looking at your plans and looking at the very well presented actually presentation, apart from the fact it judders on Teams when you try and play something which is animated, but it was clear, and actually that was almost certainly what's raised the anxiety level amongst some of us, and I think you need to take away that not all of us are very keen on these massive buildings and these very overcrowded estates, and having public realm and lots of trees drawn in and people walking around and flowers, that it's not going to look like that on a bleak winter's day, and it's not, in my view, going to be very successful, and I'm very concerned about it, and I think that as a borough we have to sit down and think very carefully about what we're actually doing here, because what we don't want to do is build slums, and people are not going to be happy, we're not going to have sustainable communities. So, you can be upset, if you like, about these sort of comments from people, from councillors, but we are entitled to have an opinion, and I have just shared with you what mine is, and Councillor Greek has every right to share with you what his is. Thank you.
Can I just say, I think this is an invitation to both yourself and Councillor Greek and other councillors to actually take you around the first phase of this development, because I would hope you would be pleasantly surprised. We can take you into the flats, we can show you the public spaces, we can show you the quality of the flats, or we could take some of our other developments across London, because I think they're definitely not the slums of the future. These are buildings built now to very modern standards, to standards set out in your own policies, London plan policies, all the supporting facilities. For me, I think it'd be useful just to show you, and perhaps show you that these aren't the slums of the future. When things are in happier times.
To have to get COVID out the way a bit before we do that, but I would be delighted to do that. Thank you.
Okay, I can't see any other hands up at the moment. I think that is a good suggestion, Martin, and if you could arrange that through Beverly, that would be wonderful. So if we could move on to the second presentation that we've got tonight, and that is land to the rear of 171 to 255 Pinner Road. And I'd like to invite MML Limited's representative Andrew Riley and Claire Gregory to give us a presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Ferry. I'm Andrew Riley from DLBP Planning Consultants. I've got Claire Gregory of Burns Guthrie Architects with me, and we act on behalf of the owner's site, MML Investments. We are seeking to develop the site to provide a residential scheme of 46 dwellings set within a landscape environment. The scheme will be a mixture of private and affordable dwellings, and shortly I'll ask Claire to take you through the presentation. Just to say that we are very pleased to be able to provide this presentation to the Council's major development panel, and this forms part of an extensive pre-application engagement programme that we have agreed with the Council's officers. MML first sought pre-application advice last year, and then in September this year we entered into a formal planning performance agreement with the Council, and that was based on the initial pre-application advice that we received that was supportive of the principle of the development, subject to the detailed design matters being sort of discussed and agreed with the Council. So I just want to say that our scheme is still being developed. We're at a relatively early stage in terms of the technical work, although this is all underway, and the design evolution will be informed by the ongoing engagement that we will be undertaking. And I can also confirm that we'll be making a full detailed planning application to the Council rather than an outline scheme. So as well as this NDP panel, we'll be doing a series of meetings with the planning officers and other technical officers at the Council. Those have already started, and we're sort of halfway through that process. We've got at least one design review panel, possibly two. And then in December, we'll be undertaking our public consultation with local residents, and obviously that will be online rather than a more sort of traditional sense. So I hope that's sort of a useful background of our sort of where we're at the moment. I'd like to hand over to Claire now, and then once she's finished the presentation, we'll be very happy to answer any questions you've got.
Okay. This is coming up. Hopefully that's just loading. There we go. Yes, so I'd like to present the scheme as it stands at the moment. As Andrew said, it's a work in progress for a site which is land behind 177 to 251 Pinner Road, Harrow. The site is a former railway siding, approximately 0.84 hectares. It's, as you would imagine from a siding, fairly steeply embanked to the north and west of the site, and gently sloping up from Neptune Road along the sort of what was the original sidings plateau. We have residential neighbours to the north of the site along Pinner Road, the railway lines, TfL railway lines to the south, and commercial and light industrial developments at east and west on the Gardens and Neptune Road. The site hasn't been managed for a number of years. It's quite heavily treed and vegetation, including some Japanese knotweed and buddleia. So there's been a lack of management, but there's real potential for improvement of that. Currently has a PTAL rating of 3, but I understand that this is likely to be raised to 4 fairly shortly, and we are close to Harrow Town Centre. The constraints of the site, obviously the shape of the site and the topography are the key drivers in the design that is emerging, and the trees and ecology of the site. We also have a 5-metre no-build zone adjacent to the railway line. We have obviously neighbouring residential properties to the north, and potential noise nuisance from the railway, although we've had initial acoustic surveys undertaken, and they're indicating that measures will be sort of fairly standard. Noise is not a particular issue here. In terms of the opportunities for the site, we wanted to make the most of its green character by retaining as much of the quality trees that are on site. We wanted to provide a high quality sustainable development close to Harrow Town Centre, and with a mix of private and affordable homes, and using the opportunity to improve the management of the landscaping on site. So this is the site layout as it stands at the moment. Apologies for the quality of the drawing. It's a very fluid situation at the moment. We're having PPA meetings with the council, and we're sort of moving blocks around and looking at the best locations, but I think we're getting there. So we've got 5 blocks on the site, a maximum of 5 stories high at the Gardens Road end. They're built using the slope of the site, so a number of the blocks have got sort of lower ground floor levels. We're looking at the scheme. We're looking at it's a density of 142 habitable rooms per hectare, and there's 46 units on site, so that equates to 54 units per hectare. And we've tried to locate the blocks to maximise the amount of green space around them, and the landscape scheme is sort of currently, now we know where the blocks are going. We're moving forward on the landscaping scheme. So this is just a 3D sketch to give you an idea. So the road layout was a key starting point. We've used the no build zone on the southern end of the site at the eastern end, where it's very narrow. We originally had a dual access, so access onto the site from both the Gardens and Neptune Road, but highways couldn't support the connection onto the Gardens because of concern that it would be a rat run, and also for loss of parking on the Gardens. So it's now a single access off of the Neptune Road, and we've had to incorporate a turning head. Also using the topography of the site to make sure that the gradient of the road was manageable for all types of vehicles. Materials palette, we wanted to reflect the natural character of the site, so we've got timber cladding. Obviously facing brick is a local material, it's hard wearing, low maintenance, and we'd be looking at some textured brick panels where we need to break up elements where obviously it's a balance between minimising fenestration overlooking the gardens of the neighbours on Pinner Road, but maintaining views over the access road for security and to give interest to the buildings. We're proposing to have a biodiverse green roof, obviously to work towards mitigation of loss of biodiversity merits, and that's an exercise we're about to embark on. Sorry, this is not terribly legible, but it's a schedule of units, 46, as I say. We've got 35 mixture of 1 and 2 bedroom units for sale, and 11 larger family sized units, which will be a mixture of affordable and intermediate. By habitable rooms, we're at 38%, which reflects the difference in size between the for sale units and the affordable. This is typical block plan, all the units are being designed to national space standards with their own amenity space and meeting the requirements of the space standards. And then just finally, just touching on some of the sort of features in response to climate change and sustainability. We're looking at CLT construction, cross-laminated timber as a modern method of construction, so minimising waste on site, and also high sequestered carbon within the timber itself, biodiverse green roofs, air source heat pumps. And yeah, I think, Andrew, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that's covered everything. Thank you, Claire. I think just to make clear, if it wasn't, I don't know if you just want to sort of bring back the site plan. I think it's sort of 3 or 4 slides back. And Claire just mentioned that we've got a single vehicular point of access from Neptune Road on the east of the site. With on the west of the site, there would just be a pedestrian access from the gardens. The level of parking that we're looking at the moment, I think, is around 18 to 19 on-site car parking spaces at a ratio of around 0.4. As I mentioned, this is still a work in progress, but initial discussions with the council's planning and highways officers have indicated that is appropriate for this site in light of its sort of close connectivity to Harrow Town Centre and Harrow on the Hill Station and so on. So I think I just wanted to potentially preempt a question that's where we're at with parking and access at the moment. What we are going to do next is actually engage the Secure by Design officer just to work out some of the arrangements around access through the site and ensures kind of it can be managed securely and safely. So yeah, I think overall that's sort of the synopsis and snapshot of where we are at the moment. We're sort of happy with the emergent scheme. We think it sort of meets all of the council's key planning policies, and what we're looking to do is obviously deliver a high quality residential scheme. So very much welcome any comments or questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Andrew and Claire. Are there any questions or comments? Samantha.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of clarification. The social housing, I mean, are you providing social housing? What's the percentage? And my second question is the privacy of the residents on the Pinner Road. As I can see, their gardens are going to be right at the back. And, if you build the flats, there's going to be some intrusion of their privacy. So how are you going to deal with it? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'll sort of take those first, and I'll let Claire come in if I sort of omitted anything or she wants to add any further clarification. So on the affordable housing, we're looking at providing 2 of the blocks. It's hard to see there, but they're basically the blocks on the right-hand side of the site, blocks D and E. They will primarily be for a mixture of affordable social rent and intermediate, and the block that has intermediate will have probably 2 for sale units as well. And because we've identified and our sort of the advice that we're getting is the need is for larger units, sort of 2 and in particular 3-bedroom units for affordable and social housing. And that's what those blocks will primarily be. So I think there will be 11 in total, and that equates to 38% of the number of habitable rooms across the site being for affordable housing. So we're exceeding the Mayor of London's housing SPG, the threshold approach there, and we think sort of the 38% is appropriate in that regard. So we're in early discussions with a number of registered providers. The operative word being early there because we couldn't sort of go any further than that. But to be clear, it's our intention to provide that as on-site affordable housing rather than an off-site contribution or anything of that nature. So I hope that sort of helps with the affordable housing question. With relationship to the properties on Pinner Road, I think you've quite rightly identified that this is sort of a key planning issue that we need to identify and to ensure that we deal with as part of the evolution of the design of the scheme. And I'm not sure if it sort of comes across from the scale of that plan or not, but the gardens of the properties on Pinner Road are quite lengthy, sort of typically around sort of 30 metres long, and are the closest properties that we've got, which are our blocks sort of D and E, again the ones on the right hand side, would be the closest to the boundary, with them blocks A, B and C being set off the boundary. And what we're seeking to do is ensure that it won't have the potential adverse impact that you've identified, Councillor. So what we're seeking to do is ensure that as many of our units, firstly, are dual aspect, but that none of the primary aspects are north facing. And obviously that helps from two angles. That helps in terms of the residential quality of our units, because we don't want sort of single aspect units that are north facing. And we want to ensure the privacy of those residents that live on Pinner Road is protected. So that's what we're seeking to do here, is to make sure that there'll be no habitable rooms that have windows that face directly towards the backs of the Pinner Road properties. And I think we're sort of confident that we can sort of manage and address any potential residential amenity concerns through that process. I mentioned earlier, just to finish on this point, that we're sort of in early stages of the technical work, but we have instructed a daylight and sunlight consultant. And the advice that we're receiving is that certainly in terms of any rear-facing habitable windows on the Pinner Road properties, our development won't have any impact whatsoever. And we're seeking to ensure that that's the same for the private garden areas of those properties as well. And that report will obviously be provided with the planning application. So I don't know if Claire, if there's anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you've covered everything, Andrew. Yes, just to say, only that yes, we did the daylight and sunlight, and actually, as far as that was concerned, we could have gone higher with the blocks by sort of up to another 2 stories, but obviously that wasn't appropriate in terms of massing on the site. But yeah, the impact is well within the permitted bounds.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments? I don't see any, so Stephen.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Just wanted to quickly ask you. You mentioned obviously you talked about the larger units, and it's good to see you've got larger units. Personally, it'd be nice to see a few more, but I'm pleased you've got some larger units. I just wanted to ask: are they likely to be on the lower floors? Ideally the ground floor, to sort of make them more suitable for families.
Sorry, Andrew, you.
So sorry, Claire. I think you're best placed to answer this question.
They go throughout, particularly Block E. They're on all of the floors. Obviously, we've got wheelchair accessible units as well within those. So, but Block E, for instance, is 3 stories, 1 above ground level and 1 below. So, with the size of the site and the opportunities for development, obviously we did sort of have to go for sort of flatted development to maximise, as I said, the landscaping. So it does mean that we have got some large units above and below ground level, but they go throughout those blocks.
So yeah, if I can add to that, and it's sort of just echoing really that latter point that Claire has made, is that the key driver, or one of the key drivers, is to maintain as much of the existing landscaping on site as we can. A number of which are protected, and we've had a full arboricultural survey, and that work is ongoing. But that does result in you know, we want to, by doing that, we want to minimise the footprints, and that means obviously we've got, you know, blocks rather than you know, the site being covered in houses, for example, which the council's officers were resistant to at an earlier stage. So, you know, I think with, you know, to answer your question, council, you know, we'll have some of those family units will be on the ground floor, some of them won't be, but I think it's, you know, from our perspective, hopefully it's the right mix.
Sorry, can I just pick up on that? So did you say you were going to provide more, you were going to provide some houses, but you were put off doing that by the council?
I think, again, Claire, probably if you could take over in a moment, but yeah, I think an earlier version of the scheme had a sort of effectively more development on the site through a different combination of you know, a mixture of houses and flats. And, you know, one of the issues that was identified was, well, actually, you know, this results in too much loss of landscaping in that respect. So, Claire, I don't know if you want to, again, help if you want to put something there. Or...
I think you've explained, yes, there was an early scheme that we submitted very early in the pre-app stage. It didn't get beyond the first meeting because to get the number of units as houses, the site was overdeveloped, and it was considered that wasn't appropriate for this site and its particular character.
Well, I'm sorry that's what the outcome of that was, because it you know, some houses might have been quite nice, but I take the point you've made about about making the whole site work. But that's just my observation. But thank you very much.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. So Andrew, Claire, thank you very much for your time and coming to show us what you have proposed there.
Thank you very much.
We don't have any other presentations, so as usual, I'd invite members to suggest topics for discussion at the next meeting and then send them to Beverly. And that, I think, concludes this meeting of the Major Developments Panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.